Day 445 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a quick look at those Russian losses, and currently Russia is sitting on 198,880 military personnel losses. So these are the KIA. So not long to go until it hits quite the big 200k milestone, which again displays Putin's complete compassionless disregard for his own soldiers and countrymen. Then we'll look at the hardware losses, so 5 Russian tanks, 18 APVs and 21 artillery. And in fact a whole bunch of UAVs there as well, 31 as you can see. Then we'll move back across to the map and we'll start out again in Russia, where I really don't know where to start with this one. But Russia had a friendly fire incident, and probably the biggest of its kind reported in any modern military's history, at least as it pertains to aircraft. So Russia took out 5 of its own aircraft in Russia in the past day, including 3 choppers, the Mi-8 variants, 1 Su-34 fighter bomber, and 1 Su-35 fighter jet, all of which was happening in Russia's Bryansk Oblast, about 70 kilometers or 40 miles from the border with Ukraine. And not only that, these are some of Russia's most advanced choppers and jets at their disposal. So basically, the aircraft were flying in the region of Bryansk, where generally the Su-35 jet is supposed to protect the Su-34 bomber, but also the special Mi-8 variant choppers in this instance are said to meant to be protect the Su-34s and 35s as well. But due to what we can only understand is because of Russia deploying older and older vintage and less capable air defense systems, because they have over 300 destroyed during this war now, this has got to be one of the most embarrassing days for Russia in this war. I mean, there's been a lot of embarrassing days, but it has to be at least, it has to crack the top 5 or top 10 for Russia, as it currently stands. I mean, they are literally doing Ukraine's job for them. So, Russia's military ineptitude or incompetence, as it pertains to its own situational awareness on the battlefield, is... I mean, I am without words on this one. It's quite perplexing. And it's not even the first time something like this has happened for the Russian military. They've been shooting down their own planes, particularly in the Donbass region, for quite some time now, both this year and last year, but never 5 in a single day. Then we'll move back across to the Ukrainian map today, where Ukrainian air defenses shot down 25 drones and 3 cruise missiles throughout the entire Ukrainian map there. Although also, Russian caliber missiles were reportedly launched towards western regions of Ukraine from the Black Sea. And some Russian missiles hit the Ternopil industrial zone, as some explosions were reported there. Oh, and it is unfortunate to say, but Russia took out an ammo depot of the Ukrainian forces in Melnitsky. So right there, I'll zoom out for some context. Then you lose there it is. And it's a bad feeling when something like this happens, even with such rarity that it is. But with my ongoing reporting over the past year or so, I actually had to stop mentioning each and every successful Ukrainian strike on a Russian ammo dump hit, because it's just so common now. I mean, I'll give you an example of the stats in the past 24-hour reporting period alone. So Ukrainian long-range artillery hit and destroyed 4 areas of concentration of manpower, 2 ammunition warehouses, as well as 2 radio electronic warfare stations of the Russian forces. And that's a regular day. So my point being, events like these always need to be taken in context. And that's all really. Then we'll move across to the Donbass today, where a Ukrainian missile strike was reported at a Russian base in Luhansk, so all the way across down here, so quite close to the border, in fact. And Ukraine doesn't actually normally strike this location that much. So what's changed? Well, as it turns out, it was the first confirmed strike performed by the UK donated Storm Shadow missiles that were just announced a few days ago, which is actually quite problemsome for the Russian forces. And I'll give you an example, because after the HIMARS 88-kilometer or 55-mile range guided munitions made their way into Ukrainian hands from NATO and the States in the middle of last year, Russia eventually had to get around to maneuvering much of their logistics and supply routes to beyond that particular range. But now, Russia has to change its game once again, as it has to deal with these high range, high payload, high precision UK Storm Shadow missiles, which can hit pretty much just about anything, anywhere in Ukraine, and many parts of Russia too, obviously. And I used to harp on about the best weapon systems that I felt Ukraine could very well strategically add to its arsenal, being long range guided munitions, even more important than NATO battle tanks in some respects. But Ukraine is slowly over time getting it all, and we can only wonder what the remainder of the year holds for map positions. And even right now, we may actually be witness to some pretty decisive changes on the battlefield landscape, with Ukraine, perhaps soon, to be notably turning the tide of the war in their favor, specifically and unquestionably. Then we'll move back into the Donbass and, of course, move to Bakhmut today, where it's all also happening there. So Bakhmut holds, and not only holds, but let's say Bakhmut strikes back, as the situation for the Russian army in Bakhmut appears to be worsening by the hour, as Russian forces are under heavy fire by Ukrainian artillery, and Russian forces are abandoning positions at their northern Bakhmut flank, said to be falling back behind the reservoirs the Russian forces there are. So I'll have to zoom in right there. The map isn't completely updated to show that as yet, though. Or, put another way, in the past 24 hours, Ukraine managed to take back what it took Russia 2.5 months to take. So just astonishing stuff. Then, in the central and southern regions of Bakhmut, Russian Wagner Forces boss and Dr. Evil wannabe Prigozhin says that his Wagner forces are wasting munitions to shoot Russian soldiers who are fleeing from their positions. And for those of you who are new to the channel, you might find this to be quite odd or non-factual, but in fact, this all reminds me of a meme I made quite some time ago now, in fact, as for the well-fortified Russian positions on the front lines, you've got the frontliners that are ordered to not go one step back for risk of being shot by the Russian or Wagner staged forces right behind them. And it's unfortunate for these Russian soldiers who are really stuck between a rock and a hard place, I've got to say. I mean, you'd never hear a NATO army doing something like this, obviously. But then again, a NATO army would use well-sufficient intelligence gathering to never even get themselves in a very poor war position like the Russian army has gotten themselves into. And so you see, the Russian army is largely about two things: manpower and artillery. And when both of these qualities are running low, which they are for Russia, then you're going to get some pretty odd outcomes like these. Then moving back to the map, looking again at the map in this region, you can see some updated liberated territories. I'll just jump to the date map to show you some pushes and changes forward in a Ukrainian direction, or a positive Ukrainian direction, I should say, with all of those liberated territories. And I can all but guarantee that in some north and south areas here right now, the Ukrainian forces have indeed pushed further. We just can't see it yet. Then moving along on the map to the south of Bakhmut. So, the Avdiivka region. On the M4, in fact, the M4 road, Russian forces hid military equipment worth tens of millions under a bridge. However, Uncle HIMARS came to town and made quick work of that position. Russia has actually been hiding military equipment under bridges near the front lines for some time now, but it never ceases to amaze me how they don't learn, how it just ends up just like this. Then we'll move around on the map to Crimea. So nothing too much happening here today, but the Crimean beaches on the west and on the south of the Russian occupied peninsula right now are increasingly looking like this. Cope cones and beach sand trenches everywhere. Again, with Russia forgetting that Ukraine doesn't actually really have anything much of a navy to speak of, not to mention an amphibious landing and assault capability. But hey, a Russian commander somewhere thought this was a genius idea, I'm sure. Then we'll move across to some news for today. So, German defense equipment manufacturer Rheinmetall is going to Ukraine soil. And this has been spoken about for some time now, but the contracts are signed now, allowing for plants on Ukrainian soil to not only repair but build German tanks as well. So that's exciting stuff, really. Then in some other news, President of Belarus and ally of Putin, Uncle Luka, has said to be taken to hospital in Minsk, so that's the capital of Belarus, as he was not looking too crash hot the other day during the Russian May 9th victory military parade. So what will come of this, we don't actually know right now. But Putin perhaps did offer him some of that suspicion Russian tea, maybe. Putin's main issue with Uncle Luka at the moment has been, well, for the last 12 months or so, that Lukashenko hasn't performed any land invasions to Ukraine right alongside Russia, as you can see on the map here. It's quite well positioned to, you could say, or somewhat. So Putin's been asking him to do this for some time now. But let's just say Uncle Luka is really ill, really unwell, and doesn't make it. That could be a huge power vacuum for Belarus with some major war-changing potential outcomes. Because if some pro-Western politicians in Belarus take to power, which they do exist, they absolutely do exist, it could all lead to some very interesting results for this war. I'm a bit of a glass half full guy, I should say, for this one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Nothing could happen at all. He might feel well later, but I am interested to see how this story progresses. Absolutely. Then in some other news, President Zelensky has arrived in Berlin of Germany and met with Chancellor Scholz. This comes off the back of Germany announcing a whopping record 2.7 billion euro military aid package to Ukraine, which includes more air defense systems like the IRIS-T air defense system, which are working fantastically, working really well, really high neutralization or interception rate. More tanks, more infantry fighting vehicles, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's really great to see there as well. Oh, then also Zelensky met with the Pope in the Vatican. So Zelensky is getting around right now. And just imagine if Putin visited Germany or the Vatican right now. It's actually an impossibility. He really can't travel far, as he has an ICC or an International Criminal Court or The Hague arrest warrant out for him due to war crimes. So Bunker Boy is going to stay in his bunker for the most part. Then in some lighter news, the Ukrainian trenches have an intruder. But instead this time it was of the furry kind. And this little stealth invader just wanted to get back right inside there. So super cute, just had to add it in. Then a final quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. A bit of a slightly smaller video, perhaps. But Russian dragon teeth, so the dragon's teeth, aka cope cones, were tested against the UK Challenger 2 tanks in Ukraine recently. And tests went as expected. The cope cones do nothing. I feel like that's something Big Arnie could say. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate all of your support, your time. Thanks again for subscribing. Really appreciate it. And I do hope to see all of you guys there on the next one. Cheers.